Behind the Scene with David Bedein, March 22nd, 2023. The change in the Supreme Court. This has generated headlines around the world. The fact that there's been a protest movement in Israel against any changes in the Supreme Court. What are the issues that are right now being discussed, which are bothering the Israeli public, or certain people in the Israeli public? Number one, there were decisions made by the Israel Supreme Court more than 30 years ago, which affect us today in Israel. One was the approval of the deal with the PLO, the agreement with the Palestine Liberation Organization, even though the Palestine Liberation Organization never ratified the Oslo Accords. Fatah, the main constituent of the PLO, rejects the Oslo Accords till this day. And on October 6, 1993, they met in special session to approve the accords and never approved them. And an essential aspect of those accords was that it would cancel the PLO covenant, the Palestine National Covenant, which involves a very clear directive to the Palestinian Arab people to continue their struggle until Israel is eliminated by all means possible, including violent means. It's very important to understand is that the Israel High Court of Justice approved the agreement with the PLO, even though they knew that the PLO did not agree to the accord, which is very important. The possibility of a cancellation of the accord with the PLO is right now on the books. Very, very important that this is going to be discussed now, and it may go through because the PLO is making it very clear that it's at war with Israel, and this upsets the apple cart for many, many strategists in the Israel military who are into the idea that the Oslo process, the process by which Israel would make various, shall we say, concessions to the PLO, including territorial concessions, economic concessions, this would all be put to the fire. It would not happen anymore. Now, what's very important to understand is that this is the rubric of not only the Oslo process but also the Israeli economy. The Israeli economy allowing Israel corporations to invest in the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which has set up something which looks like a legitimate entity, the Palestinian Authority, whereas in fact it's still part of the PLO, it's part of a terrorist operation. That's not something that is a matter of conjecture. That's what it is. 400 Israeli corporations, maybe 500 Israeli corporations, may be under strategic, very clear scrutiny in the near future as a result of that. Now, what's important to understand is that the PLO is also and has been allowed to make all kinds of deals with the Israel Civil Administration to allow workers to continue their work without security establishment checks. And the Israel Supreme Court has rejected most of the restrictions on Palestinian Arab workers for the sake of the economy. Well, that may change now. Now, that's not the only thing that will change. One of the reasons for corporate objection to any change in the courts is because of the leniency which the Israeli government allowed corporations to operate, not only in the political field with Arab workers, but also in terms of migrant workers, allowing migrant workers to come in, allowing the high-tech companies from around the world to establish their base in Israel, where they would work 24/7 with no restrictions on Sabbath work, and instead of having a situation in Israel where all workers were allowed to have a Sabbath day, a day off to observe the Sabbath. Has no longer been the case over the last few years. That may change. That's one of the reasons why high-tech companies have invested so much efforts into the protest movements against the current accords. Now you have also other issues which Israel has to deal with, which are connected. Now the fact that the PLO passed a law, I'll show you on the screen now, the law that it passed to incentivize terror, an actual law that was passed and confirmed on August 15th, 2015, that if you murder a Jew, you get a salary for life. Now, any appeals against that law, which went to the Israel High Court of Justice, was thrown out because it was viewed as a political deal, that Israel had a political deal with the Palestinian Authority. However, how can you have a situation where you have an unprecedented law that if you murder a Jew, you get a salary for life, being looked at as something which is normal and which is nominal, normative, and that's something that is being challenged now. What's very important to understand is that the the status of the PLO in Israel is finally being challenged, whereas before it wasn't challenged. Today, the Israel government has declared that it wants to see the PBC, the Palestine Broadcast Corporation, closed down, because the PBC, which is the official voice of the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, which has been operating, amongst other things, in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, without any constraints for the last 30 years. That's going to stop now. One of the reasons is because on a daily basis, terror acts are approved, terror acts are sanctioned on the PBC, something that should not be acceptable, and that's what's been going on. All of our letters to the government in the last 30 years, all the petitions were thrown out, and the High Court of Justice just saw that, well, the PA is operating as a normal entity that operates inside Israel. Why not? Well, there is a big why not, and that was challenged today. Very, very important. That may change, and that's one of the things that many people are afraid of. Many people are very afraid that the whole operation, the economic cooperation between Israel and the PLO may stop. Remember, the PLO got its income through Yasser Arafat, and through a situation of, you might call it an organized crime kind of a way of operating, where the PLO had amassed a fortune of $9 billion at the time of the Oslo Accords in 1993, and that money was accrued to the PLO through criminal techniques, by shaking down nations. Said, if you don't want terrorism in your country, then work with us and give us an appropriate monthly fee. Today, there are 135 nations that provide economic aid to the PA. No restrictions whatsoever. No restrictions. And you take a school system. Now, you want to see the school system, which we have monitored in our agency. You can see our we'll put up a slide in a minute of the Palestinian Authority school system. Very clear. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. And a brand new school book, it came out only a few years ago, which sanctioned, which approved the murder of Jews. Now, what do I mean by that? You take I'm going to show you on page 51 of the fourth grade civics curriculum for children, and you have here a picture of a terrorist, Dalal al-Mughrabi, who murdered 36 Jews in terror act on March 11th, 1978, and including 13 children. And there's 4 pages here which describe her as a hero. And the PA just came out with a new edition, 2023. You probably can't see it through the net there, but it's a brand new edition. Every year putting it out. When we show this to the staff of the United States, the United Nations Secretary General, he was shocked to see this. He was shocked to see that the United Nations agency, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, would use this in their curriculum. Again, this is not precedent by any nation, any time. There would be a school book which would instruct children on the wonders of someone who murders people, in this case, murdering Jews. That's very important. And the pay to slay law, which operates today, which Israel for the first time is challenging, this pay to slay law, from which you just saw about incentivizing terrorism. When we ask any of the donor nations, will you condition aid to the PA on a cancellation law? We get no response. Now, this morning, we sent another letter to the United States Embassy, which condemned the latest series of Arab terrorist attacks. I said, why not ask for a repeal of the law as a condition for funding? Remember, the United States in the Biden administration has provided more than $1 billion to the PA, so it can have a say on such a thing. We get no response except that we condemn terrorism. Condemning terrorism has very little, carries very little weight. Repeal of that law would have a great influence, which is very important. But again, for the first time, the Israel High Court of Justice will support efforts of Israel to make life difficult for the Palestinian Authority, which hadn't been until now. For 30 years, the PA has operated with a kosher certificate, allowing it to do more or less anything it wanted, and all of a sudden that will change. And many corporations, many individuals invested in the PA, in the Palestinian Authority, will now pay a very severe price for that mistake. And this is David Bedein reporting. Behind the Scene with David Bedein. Thank you.
Israel's elected government has been advancing certain reforms. The main goal of the reforms is to restore checks and balances between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. These reforms were among its main election promises and enjoy solid public support. Over the last 2 decades, the judicial branch has annexed powers in a way that cannot be found in any other democracy in the world. For example, sitting Supreme Court justices have an effective veto over the appointment of new justices. The court can use vague claims of unreasonableness to overturn any government policy or to disqualify inconvenient civil service appointments that are out of its jurisdiction. The court declared Israel's basic laws to be its constitution and uses them to annul ordinary statutes. But now it has taken to itself the authority to rule parts of this very constitution unconstitutional. The court decided, with no basis in law, that any ruling of the Attorney General is binding on the government. That means that an appointed civil servant is now the boss of the elected Prime Minister. Could you imagine any of these things happening in the United States or any other democratic country? Some of the court's rulings have done severe long-term social and economic harm. For example, the court suspended signed government contracts for offshore natural gas drilling, undermining its ability to do business. The court overruled hard-won compromises regarding Haredi army enlistment that sent Israel into an endless series of elections. Prominent Israeli former Supreme Court judges have strongly criticized the current judiciary's abuse of power, and so have eminent judicial scholars from around the world. Professor Richard Posner called Israeli Chief Justice Aaron Barak an enlightened despot and a legal pirate. The reforms in progress will address the anomalies of the Israeli system and bring Israel just a few steps closer to the rest of the Western democracies.